Lots of great board game news and announcements this week. It seems this year is going to be a great one for board game fans. Let's find out how for the news roundup of June 5th, 2023. A new Gloomhaven is coming to Backer Kit later on this month. No, it's not a sequel like Frosthaven, nor is it a spin-off like Jaws of the Lion. This is a new second edition for the original Gloomhaven. Isaac Childress stated while Gloomhaven has been very popular and very successful, this new edition is definitely something that he's very proud of and felt like needed to be done in order to make some changes to both the mechanics and the world that Gloomhaven presented. Now, mechanically, it's what you probably expect, lots of balancing issues. There are things tweaked here and there. An example I saw was for the Eclipse class. Apparently it is really strong. Now, they didn't just straight up nerf it. They tried their best to keep the fun of the class without making it so it's not fun to play, but also not so cheesy that it can just beat any encounter that it goes into. And another big thing, this is definitely in between, I guess, but they want to put a stronger emphasis on all the different groups you interact with. So when you side with more of the guard and military, or maybe with the merchants, there's going to be more perks you unlock, and you're actually going to have special envelopes for that. Definitely something more akin to what we might want to expect in, at least what I think of when playing open world video games. A lot of the factions tend to be much more important. I think of Fallout, for example, where it literally could lock you out of certain story beats. So I imagine that we're going to see a more focus there in these envelopes, as well as just these story beats. Not really changing the storyline per se, but rather just really making you feel like I sided with this group. Another big change Isaac mentioned in this edition was changing the way how the game sort of leans on stereotypes of certain groups. There are plenty of videos already out about this, and even for Frosthaven, he talked about how he worked with many consultants to make sure those mistakes didn't carry on through in that game. And the same now will be said in this second edition, as many consultants have worked on this one as well, making sure that it's a more fair representation without using some more basic tropes. Now, the two things you're going to need to know if you're interested is, one, this is going to be on Backer Kit June 20th. Make sure you have that marked on your calendar and you go to the right site. Two, there will not be an upgrade kit for those who already own old Gloomhaven. Apparently, there's enough changes here to I'm thinking mostly the story rather than the mechanical components, that it would just be unfeasible for them to make just an upgrade kit. Now, on the one hand, that definitely stinks, as, for example, I own original Gloomhaven, and to rebuy it is just, especially it's a very high price. On the other hand, that hopefully means that there is enough changes here that really make it worth a new core, rather than feeling like I could have just gotten a small little envelope that has some extra cards in it. So definitely we'll have to wait and see. I am positive on it because when it comes to all the other Haven games, it's not like copy-paste job of previous games when it comes to the storyline. So I imagine there's going to be a lot more interesting dialogue changes. I'm most excited for the group, the more focus on the group, because that's something I really enjoy. It's a big thing I enjoy in, for example, the Fallout video games. So I'm hoping that really does not just like give you strong tools, but really fun and feel like I'm now with this group. It makes sense for me to make choices with this group, not just I made that choice on a road encounter, 2 rounds ago. Now, we'll have to see how this goes. I'm really curious because on the one hand, in my mind, I'm just like, oh, Gloomhaven just came out, but it didn't. I'm just thinking of Frosthaven. And two, Frosthaven is out, and maybe enough people have finished the campaign, but I feel Gloomhaven had a huge window before we even saw Jaws of the Lion, and plenty of people were still, I think, engrossed with Gloomhaven. So I wonder how that will go in terms of the fun. It's still a Haven game, so I think it'll do well, but I'm really curious to see how board gamers in particular react to this. Video games, especially this year, are already doing very well when it comes to remakes or remasters, and depending on whatever word you use, thinking of Resident Evil 4 and Dead Space. So we'll see if Gloomhaven follows the same trend when it comes to, nerds being happy to rebuy a more polished version of a game they love. And with the minis as well as the RPG announced as well, this just does seem like a pretty good time to bring back the classic Gloomhaven that started this huge trend. GAMA released their finalists for the Origin Awards for 2023. There are 14 different categories, with each of them having around 5 possible winners. So let's take a quick look at all of them, as there's maybe too much to cover one by one, but maybe a full glance just so you can see who has a chance to take home an award this year. Forgive me if I go a bit quick here, but there is a lot to cover. When it comes to the social light strategy, Flamecraft and Longshot have been nominated for other awards, and I'm definitely a big fan of both, so that's where I probably would lean more towards. When it comes to strategies, while there are a lot of cool ones here, Planet Unknown has already been nominated for so much stuff that is probably the one to bet on, but I've heard a lot of amazing things about Three Sisters as well, and I really enjoyed playing Evergreen, so who knows, maybe Planet Unknown won't be able to take home every award it's nominated in. Then, in terms of thematic, I mean, I love My Father's Work as my number one, so that's the one I'd want to win and hope for. No offense to the other games, like I said in my top 10, it's like it was made for me. Then, in terms of the card games, big fan of Cat in the Box and Turing Machine. Interesting, I guess technically it is, but I guess it just isn't in my head the same style, but the cards are very unique. Children's game, I don't have as much knowledge in, but if I recall correctly, Turtles Splash almost got the Kinderspiel nominee. It was one of the honorable mentions, if I recall correctly. So that's probably some points to that. In terms of collectibles, I feel like it's whatever game you play, so that's going to be a little bit hard to compare them all. I am surprised Unmatch is there. I mean, I guess there's a lot of expansions, but it doesn't feel the same as the rest of them, where a bit more random, but that may be just me. I will say, as a Magic the Gathering player, I definitely agree with these two products. These are definitely some of the better ones. I thought the Brothers War set was really fun and cool, and I think they did a fantastic job when it came to the Warhammer 40k decks outside of their availability. And as we head into miniatures and RPG, it's harder and harder for me to be able to give sort of my thoughts as I'm less experienced here. Miniatures, I can't say too much on, and same thing with RPG. That said, Free League Publishing has 2 games in there, and I really enjoy everything I've done by Free League Publishing. But of all these, I gotta say, Coyote and Crow is the one I want to try out the most. So I don't think just because Free League Publishing has multiple entries and they've done very well before means I should count out the other games. RPG supplements, a lot of starter sets. I believe Blade Runner Starter Box was a nominee or winner when the UK Game Expo Awards. I'd have to double check on that. And accessories, a lot of cool, fun little stuff here. And I think more for if you are a fan of that thing. Obviously, for example, as a fan of Power Rangers, a Zordon Dice Tower was one of the coolest things I saw. So definitely a great idea from Renegade Game Studios. Art, of course, is going to be subjective, so whatever you enjoy the most. Now, graphic design, I'm not sure here if that means like the layout and stuff, not just like how the art looks, which I think should get more credit than or maybe even if that's not part of this, its own separate award for rulebook layout and design in terms of readability and ease of use, as I don't think enough games are given credit when they have an amazing rulebook versus a game that everyone might love, but the rulebook is just really bad, but once you know it, you're fine. And finally, reviews. This good list, if you're interested in any of these games or RPGs, then check them out. Regardless if they won or not, it probably means any of these channels or article sites are worth checking out. So plenty of games we've already heard plenty of nominations for in different awards or even won them. So I'm not surprised to see a lot of these games on these lists. I do find it curious. I want to point out, and correct me if this is very common, for the RPG supplement section, a lot of them are actually beginner boxes. It's rewarding getting the new players in rather than being all the different expansions. This one had the best story, or this one had the best new class or something. Now, there are some of those, but just the large amount of beginner boxes to me, I find to be, actually, I enjoy that because that's one of the most important things is to get people started. So a good beginner box should not be taken lightly. Now, you can let me know what you think of these. Do you think that these are all the right picks? Do you think there's a shoo-in for a certain award? Or was there a game that was snubbed? Let me know in the comments down below. The UK Game Expo wrapped up earlier, and they report some very good news when it comes to board game conventions. Now, things have been rough for many conventions as they haven't been able to either happen or had a lot of strict rules over the last few years because of the pandemic. But this year, the UK Game Expo broke its previous record in terms of number of attendees. The previous record was in 2019 with 25,000 attendees, but this year they recorded 32,000 attending the show. This is good news as it shows the board game conventions are back in a full swing. And while I'm sure part of this is almost the revenge vacations or traveling I've been hearing about, I think we're starting to get back into the idea of being okay with going into large groups and expecting that kind of crowd, which is, of course, not only a big deal for the convention holders, but as well as the companies, as many companies have been wondering whether it's going to be worth going to conventions again. Is it worth having a booth? Are they going to have the same numbers, the same eyeballs on their products? It does seem, at least with the UK Game Expo, that that is the case, and I would not be surprised if we see that trend go with the other two large conventions, Gen Con and Essen Spiel, later on this year. I've talked about the D&D OLG problems and how Pathfinder decided to make a whole new version of Pathfinder to separate itself completely from D&D, and apparently we've learned some news of how this may change a race that we maybe assume would always be a part of campaigns. Now, there is a new project. It's not a 3rd edition, rather, it's just Pathfinder 2nd edition remastered, basically making sure that they are going with their orc system, if I recall now, rather than the OGL, so they can really make sure it's their properties. They don't have to worry about another D&D OGL crisis from occurring. Unfortunately, they have decided that this means that the Drow race is too D&D, and they will no longer be included in the Pathfinder books. Instead of the Drow, we're now getting serpent creatures, and apparently they will still have a bit more of an evil leaning. I'm pretty sure I thought they removed that when it came to D&D because they didn't want any kind of this is a evil race going on, especially if it's one that you choose to play as. Now, I don't know, and I assume you will be able to in Pathfinder be able to play as one of these serpent folk, but we'll have to wait and see. They also say that this doesn't mean you can't technically play as a Drow in a homebrew. It's just that when it comes to the cities and stories that are in Pathfinder's history, when they re-release them as part of this remastered edition, they're going to replace the all Drows with the serpent people to make sure it sticks more with the orcs and that they don't get tied up with the OGL again. Finally, a quick one, but a sort of final hurrah and thank you. Artist John Blanche is leaving and retiring from Games Workshop. If you don't know, he is responsible for many important famous pieces when it comes to Warhammer and Warhammer 40k. I believe he is the creator of what is to me the most prominent piece of the Emperor sitting on the gold throne. He's also responsible for a miniature painting style called Blanchitsu, I think I'm saying that right. So definitely been a huge force within the world of Games Workshop and its properties. So take a chance to take a look at some of his work, whether it be his miniature paintings or his artwork, as the maybe ones you're already familiar with, you just didn't know how much he shaped the world of Warhammer and Warhammer 40k. And now on to game announcements, though first, technically just more information on an already talked about announcement. Last week, I talked about the Ticket to Ride Legacy game. We now also know that, while it'll be sold in November, you will be able to pick up an early copy at Gen Con, so prepare for those lines. But in terms of new announcements, first from Restoration Games, we have another old game getting that new shine. Crossbows and Catapults is going to be their next big remake of a game. And then we've got a new Challengers 2. Challengers just got nominated for the Kennerspiel, so that seemed to be the perfect time to be like, we have a new standalone expansion coming out. It's basically its own little core set. It has a new characters and these trainer cards, but this can be mixed with the previous Challengers. Then we have a new expansion for Ashes Reborn titled Red Rains. This one's actually pretty big as it's actually adding solo and cooperative gameplay as well as new cards, so new ways for you to play Ashes Reborn. Then we have a new Warhammer board game called Space Marines, the board game. This apparently is based off the video game of the same title, which I believe the new Warhammer video game that came out, the Heavy Bolter or just Bolters, it's sort of the old school shooter game, boomer shooter. So I wonder if this means that that may be turned into a board game pretty soon and also maybe designed to reflect old board games, and that'd be interesting. Regardless, new ways for you to play Warhammer in addition to the 10th edition that'll be coming out shortly. Then this is more of just heads up. We have a new expansion or standalone base for the DC deck building game titled DC Deck Building Justice League Dark. This is based on the Magic users and will be coming to Kickstarter. And finally, we have another competitive legacy game from Reiner Knizia. We actually reviewed the previous one, My City. You can go check that out. But this one is titled My Island. So if you enjoyed My City, you'll probably want to check this one out as well. It'll be coming out later in July. But that is all the news we have this week. Let me know, are you excited for the new Gloomhaven 2nd edition, or are you fine with the version that you have? As well as, of course, all the other big releases, the good news for conventions. It seems like we're really starting to ramp up in that convention season. So let me know your thoughts and your plans when it comes to board game conventions. But for now, thank you so much for telling me your thoughts. That's all we have this week. I'll see you next time on the News Roundup.